it is a case that has gripped the Pacific Northwest. A killer terrorizing young women in Washington state in the 70s. Warren Forrest was convicted of 2 murders in Clark County, but investigators say he is suspected in at least 7 deaths. And a new investigative podcast is re-examining this case. It's called Stolen Voices of Dole Valley. And this is very exciting. Joining us this morning is the host, journalist Carolyn Ossorio. Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us on ArcPDX.
Hi, Wesley. How are you?
Great, great. Okay, so I'm so curious, like, what first inspired you to start this podcast and specifically look at this case?
Well, I had been doing true crime podcasting for a while, and so I had pretty much heard of all the serial killers that most of us in the Pacific Northwest have heard of, but I hadn't heard of I hadn't heard of Warren Forrest, and that surprised me. And then when I went and did a deep dive, I was just shocked by what he had done, what he'd gotten away with, but really it was the victims and their families and investigators who over a 50-year case just never gave up. And those types of stories always inspire me. Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. I know the podcast premiered back in August. So what parts of this case has it uncovered so far, and then what happens next?
Well, the series really focuses in on the victims and their families and these investigators and just the twists and turns of the case. I mean, it'll just make you want to rip your hair out and get angry and upset, but it will also make you inspired by that's Norma Jean Countryman, one of those images that flashed up, and she was basically chewed through her bindings. He'd taken her to Tukes Mountain, and she escaped, bunny hopped throughout the night, collapsed in front of the Clark County, he was a Parks and Rec employee, but she wasn't believed. And so we really focus on her journey about what this has been like for her, but then she's also become this huge advocate, and there's so many stories. That's Jamie Grissom. She's never been found. Her sister, Star Laura, has never given up on finding her. And that's the thing about this case, is that you have investigators over the decades who have never given up either. And so right now it's a real pivotal time because there's some DNA evidence that could be tested. There was these man hairs that were found back in the 70s. And when I was doing my research, I was like, hey, let's take a look at these hairs. And I hooked the Clark County Sheriff's Office up with Paul Holes, who's a famous criminalist. He's well known for helping to solve the Golden State Killer case and was really at the forefront of this investigative genetic genealogy. So he's really helping them. And I have to say that the Clark County Sheriff's Office has just been amazing in terms of their openness and willingness to solve these cases, or try to, for these victims and their families.
Wow, that's awesome to hear too. Very cool that like something could actually happen here because of this. I'm curious. I'm sure you learned a ton of new stuff about this in your investigation and your reporting and doing this podcast. Is there anything that like really surprised you, a nugget of information, without giving too much away? We want people to listen to it, but anything that's worth telling us now?
I just find that with podcasts and true crime podcasts, we've seen cases being solved after so many years. And it's just amazing to be a part of something that could help so many people. I mean, what he has done over 50 years, and he is still alive, has impacted, and the ripples throughout the community are just, you really need to hear the podcast to truly understand. And that's what's great about doing a podcast, is that you have the time to go into all the layers of this case. And working with our partners, Lemonada Media and KSL Podcasts, they just put the time and resources into really telling this long form storytelling that is so important.
Yeah. What messages do you hope to send to people who are listening to this podcast?
Well, believe victims. It's 2025 and people can dismiss, some of the, it was back in the 70s and there was a lot of that, because back in the day, Portland was viewed as, that's the big city, and Clark County is rural and community. But he really fed on, this is my personal opinion, the fact that he thought nobody would care about these victims, young women who were vulnerable, just doing what every person was doing, or many people were doing in the 70s, which was hitchhiking and, trying to find themselves. And he took advantage of that. And so with this show and with the help of so many people, hopefully there will be some kind of reckoning, either a confession of, the victims he's suspected of, or another prosecution in the case of Carol Valenzuela.
Wow. Yeah. And so where can people listen to this? Where can they find your podcast?
Yeah, they can find it wherever they listen to podcasts. Please like and subscribe to the show. That really helps. And, this is a Trojan horse for larger societal issues that we're still dealing with. And I hope you'll listen.
Yeah. Well, I cannot wait to listen to this. Amazing work. Carolyn Ossorio, thank you so much for being on ArcPDX this morning.